Hi you guys, I do not have an unboxing for you today. I actually have a kind of dark and disturbing true crime story of which I am the survivor. And I'm going to read from my phone. I wrote this out because I tried multiple times to make this video without having anything written, and my mind got scrambled and I went blank. So, excuse me. It still makes my body shake and my throat close up to tell these stories. So I'm going to go through them quickly, but if you want the whole story, I've written and posted them, and there's a link in my bio. They do get progressively worse, the last being very similar to Giseles story, so just stop listening when you can't handle it. The point is not to scare anyone, but instead bring awareness to the fact that these are not uncommon incidents that happen to just a few people. Like Giseles and I, you may not even know that you're being assaulted until years later. And if you get nothing else from this, I would just like women to hear me suggest that you get hidden cameras for your house, your entry points, and your bedroom. And if you can't afford those $50 Wise cameras, just put up a sign that says, "Smile, you're on camera," and you might deter someone. So here are the stories. A date I met at a bar invites me to his house party. I get there and it's just him and one other guy. The date tells me I have to come see this huge collection of crazy, wild onesies and skips down a long hallway. I ran after him thinking this was fun. He runs through his bedroom to a big closet, then stops abruptly and turns to me and says, "Oops, I guess I don't have any onesies after all." I was deeply confused as to why he just randomly lied. Then he grabbed my head and forced a kiss, shoving his tongue in my closed mouth. I pulled back and pushed against his chest, and he continued shoving his tongue in my mouth. I finally moved my head away and yelled, "Oh my God, your mouth is so bitter." And he just went, "No, I think that's your lipstick." And I was like, I would know if it was my lipstick. I wear my lipstick every day. Then he grabbed my head again and continued to shove his tongue in my mouth. Then he picked me up, threw me on his bed, and started trying to assault me. Luckily, I was wearing something I made, a play suit, and only I knew how to get this play suit off because I made it in a crazy wild way. And I was punching him in the head while he was trying to assault me, and he was like, "How the do you get this thing off?" He was also very confused about that, and I just kept punching him and hitting him and kicking, and he yelled out, "What is this, some chastity belt?" And I finally got him so hard, right where it counts, and he crouched just for a second. I jumped up, I ran out of there, and he yelled out, "You're on cocaine!" That's what was so bitter. Okay, so that's the tamest of these stories. If you can't handle that, don't keep listening, because it can get worse. Another date invited me to his house party. The guests were mostly other girls, so I felt comfortable, except for they're not really talking to me in my date. He lived there. We talked for a few hours. It was all very interesting, but I wasn't attracted to him. The other guests had all retreated to a single room and closed the door. I said it's time for me to go. He begged that I just stay for one cup of tea. I said I'm really not into tea. He talks up this tea a lot and says I just really have to try at least one little sip. So he makes the tea and I do try it, and I'm feeling really sleepy, and I tell him I have to go home. He goes in for a kiss and I turn my head away and he made out with the side of my cheek. And I started pushing away. I'm like, "I'm so sorry, I really have to go." I was really polite back then, you guys, and I was not ever able to say no. All I ever did when things were going bad was run. And then he picked me up, and he was like, it was surprising that he could pick me up. He was petite. And he held me really close and started forcing kisses on me while he was picking me up. Then he ran with me in his arms into a single bedroom that had nothing in it except for a bare mattress on the floor. and I realized something is really, really wrong, and he has bad intentions. And I started punching and kicking and doing everything I could to get out from under his weight. He had thrown me on the bed and was on top of me. And again, kicked him really hard in the balls, I think with my knee, and jumped up and ran down this long freaking hallway, and he shouted out after me, "She escaped!" Who is he talking to? Okay, so that's the second one. This is where it gets serious. This is where I failed to run away. A Tinder date with a local tea business owner who was at the time also a pharmaceutical salesman. We meet at a restaurant for what I thought was a dinner date. I hadn't eaten all day, saving up my appetite for this, and I start to order, and he goes, "Oh, you're eating? I already ate." I explained that yes, I thought this was a dinner date, so I am eating. I haven't eaten all day, and I had one drink. However, coming back from the bathroom sometime later, I recall the feeling of just floating back to the table and feeling incredibly exuberant. I was so excited and like, woo, so happy, unbelievable. And he goes, like he's talking to a child, "You should come back to my house. We're having a big party. I've got a hot tub under the stars." By the way, he didn't eat anything. He didn't drink anything. Only I did. I get the bill and pay for my own meal, and apparently followed him home, which I do not remember driving there, but I do remember what the house looks like, and I do remember the house, and I have found it since. And what I remember then was being in the hot tub with one other guy that was there, a friend of his, and I kept begging for water. I was so thirsty. I was like, "Water, water, can I please have some water?" My mouth was like weird, and he kept saying, no, try this wine. You'll really like this wine. This is good wine. It's local, made here," like he's talking to a toddler. I was aware. I was just incapacitated. And I kept begging for water. And then he goes, "Oh my gosh, you have to come see my bed. You have to feel my bed. It's so soft. And I have a dog upstairs." And that dog, he got me. And I just remember crawling up the stairs because I couldn't walk, and everything was so wobbly. And I got up, and there was a dog there. There was a golden retriever, fluffy, soft dog, and I was petting the dog, and then the next thing I knew, I was up on his bed, on my back, and he was beside me. And I was confused how I got there, and I started realizing I couldn't really move, and I was just stuck staring at the dog on the floor. And that's when he said the most bewildering thing. He said, "Oh my God, you're so wet. That's so hot." And I was like, first of all, I am not wet for this guy. I didn't like him from the beginning. I was not attracted to him. And secondly, how would he know that? And I'm able to barely adjust my eyes down. Things are bouncing, so I'm just like adjusting my vision down and see his hands up my dress. And that's when I realized I couldn't feel my body at all. Then he gets up on top of me, pulls off my underwear, and assaulted me. And the whole time that he's doing this, he's still talking to me like a child, and he's saying, "Sex is really good for humans. We need this. It makes good feeling hormones throughout our bodies." And he's explaining why I want to have sex with him right now, which I didn't. And then he finally finishes with a groan, and he rolls off to the right. And at just that moment, I had enough adrenaline going. I flopped myself down onto the floor and hit the floor really hard, which kind of like jump started me. I scrambled on all four down the stairs, falling down the stairs, briefly thinking about where are my boots, couldn't find my boots, got in my car. My next memory is being at the Fulton and Highway 12 intersection at a stoplight, seeing the whole world go like this in arcs. My entire visual perception just bouncing in arcs from left to right. But in my mind, I was steady and calm and alert, and I knew that if I just stayed between the lines, I would get home okay. And that's a 15-mile drive up through the mountains, and I did make it. And I never heard from him again. But his products were at one of the cafes that I love to go to, and I had only told my best friend, and a few days later we're there, and we're at the cafe in line to order, and she just blurts out, "That man is an evil rapist." And everyone in the cafe is just kind of like silent and doesn't say anything because there's no context. All I felt was just really embarrassed. And I was just like, shh. And we just went and sat, and it was never talked about again until I found a therapist. And for years later, I didn't tell anyone else again until I told the police and made a report, to which they said, "You have no evidence. Sorry, there's no case, but if you can find someone else that has the same kind of story, then maybe we'll take it seriously." So anyways, that is that story. This last one is very dark, but it's something that needs to be brought to the light to keep women aware. I was being assaulted in my own house, in my own bed, by someone I knew and the two friends he invited along, and I didn't know about it for years. It happened at least twice, but more than likely more often, and possibly with other people that I don't recall. I only remembered these assaults years after they happened, after I had done enough therapy with a very special therapist who helped me create a new life in which I finally felt safe enough to remember what I wasn't strong enough to recall before. And these events have been reported in great detail to the authorities, who again informed me that I don't have any real evidence for a case. So they gave me 10 yoga lessons and let me know that if I mentioned any names publicly, I could be the one facing the chopping block for a slander lawsuit. So from here on, I will refer to him as he who must not be named publicly. However, you can DM me. It was spring 2018, and I was waking up with bruises all over my body, unsure of how I was getting them. My hair was falling out. I was passing out while driving home, passing out while posting vintage dresses in bed at night, with my phone hitting me so hard in the face, and I didn't even have the energy to pick up the phone off my face. It was just complete zonk out. I was waking up physically paralyzed, but my mind was drowsily awake. I felt like there were earthquakes at night, but I couldn't wake myself up to do anything about it. I was having constant nightmares about being heavily drugged and trying to escape men grabbing at me. But my body was so slow and heavy, I couldn't escape. I was waking up with a deep pain inside of me. One day the pain was so great that I thought I was dying, so I went to a local private doctor who told me I have a huge gash deep inside of me that had gotten infected. I remember her gasping when she saw it and said, kind of rhetorically, "How did this happen?" I told her that I was I don't know if I can even say it, SW-er at the time, so she didn't take notes, but she remembers this, and I have since visited her. And she said, "How did this happen?" And just hearing that was so shocking for me. My mind was scrambled, and all I could honestly say was, I don't know. He who must not be named publicly invited me over, and while cooking me breakfast, turned to me and said, so very casually, "Have you ever heard of this drug that's odorless and tasteless that you can put on someone's toothbrush and they'll just go to sleep and pass out without knowing they were drugged?" I felt total bewilderment at this question, and I said, "No, I have never heard of that." And all I could think of inside was, why would he even ask me that? What a weird thing to say. What a weird thing to say. I just kept saying that over and over in my head. And later I learned that this and his many other random questions were memory checks. I began to feel really sick all the time, and I was a month late on my period. I assumed it was because of the infected wound inside of me. I finally just took a pregnancy test, and it was positive. I was reeling. I couldn't believe this could be possible. I was always so careful. Dancer's got to protect his brain from an oncoming threat. Oh, thanks, Dancer. He's my comic relief. I had to do this with the horses. I tried in my studio and it didn't go so well, but these babies give me strength. It's actually why I've done all the things that I've done. Without telling anyone, I had an at-home pill abortion while watching Offred in Handmaid's Tale give birth alone in an abandoned house. My best friend grabbed my arm one day and exclaimed, "Susie, these are literal handprints on your arms. It's creepy." She said she had goosebumps all over her body just looking at them, and I really didn't know how this was happening. He who must not be named publicly had bought me a new iPhone, even though I was an Android person. I now realize iPhones are very easy to set up with tracking. He could see when I was coming and going. He once bought me a giant kitty tower and cat bed, and I said, "How did you know I didn't have one?" He smiled and said, "He just guessed." He brought me a piece of wood and instructed me to put it behind my sliding glass door so that there was only enough room for my kitty to go in and out, but not wide enough for a person. When I went home and did just that, I had extreme anxiety, and I was deeply suspicious about how he knew how long to cut it, and he knew that I had a sliding glass door in my bedroom, and how did he know that I kept it cracked open at all times so my kitty could go in and out? I did ask him about this one day, how he knew all this, and he said, "You must have told me." I wasn't suspicious enough, or at that time my mind didn't allow me to put the pieces of the puzzle together because I had no support in my life at that time. My grandma had just died, and I had just found out that I had yet another miracle pregnancy. I took a second at-home abortion, totally lost in drama and confusion and severe dissociation. I would find myself screaming while driving in my car, then catching myself and asking, is that me screaming? Was I just screaming? He who must not be named publicly then gave me a little pink knife. "For my protection," he said as he gave it to me. It was at this point that I had told him I wouldn't be seeing him or anyone anymore. I was just going to focus on selling dresses. He told me about a dream he had. "You were sitting on a hospital bed and you looked really, really sick, and there were 2 little black-haired children," he had black hair, "at your bedside crying, 'Mommy, Mommy, no,' and then they just slowly faded out of existence." I still didn't connect any dots at the time, but he clearly knew that I had had 2 abortions, and that they were probably his. I finally told him that I recently had 1 abortion, not 2, as this embarrassed me, like it was my fault somehow, and that I suspected that somehow it was because of him. He denied all possibilities in every way he could dream up, but still gave me some cash. I told him over and over he did not accept. I told him that it was over and he did not accept. My therapist helped me stay firm and block him, which he was not happy about. A few months later, my ex-boyfriend and I got together and we moved into our first home together. It was robbed the night we moved in. I remember seeing headlights out the window and being too tired to move and falling back asleep, even though my heart was pounding very fast. A few years later, during a particularly intense therapy experience, I remembered that I was assaulted in my own bed by 3 men, and I saw their faces between heavy eyelids, barely able to open. I remember their fat, sweaty faces over me, and I remember the bed shaking like an earthquake under my body, but not being able to feel my body at all. I relived the experience in a safe place with someone I absolutely trusted would not just feel sorry for me, which had been one of the major reasons I rarely spoke up about what happened to me. A couple years after this realization, the various assaults came up again in a therapy session, mainly about the T-guy assault. And she asked me, "Have you ever looked him up online to see if anyone has ever reported a similar experience?" I had never thought of this. I went home and looked up the tea guy, and there was nothing. Then she sent me a text image of he who must not be named publicly, and it was a mugshot of him on the registry of sex offenders. The charge beside his name was assaulting a child under 12 years age with a foreign object. And by assaulting, I mean S-A. It was R-A-P-I-N-G that it says, but I can't say that. Just another way to keep people silent. I collapsed when I saw this. I had this idea that maybe it was just me, and it ended with me. And then more memories came flooding back, like when a girl named Katie, who he had given a large amount of money to help her move to Austin, Texas, called him when we were together and just said over the phone, just yelled at him over the phone over and over again, how the am I pregnant right now? How the am I pregnant right now? And I remember looking at his face, and he just like shrunk like a turtle, his face going back down into his neck and his eyes bulging. And all he said was, I don't know. I don't know. He was really scared. And I remembered how he told me this story of him and his two buddies going to this elite cat house in Novato that costs $10K just to get registered. And that when you go in, you're just surrounded by women pampering you, and you get to pick your favorites, and they take you to a private room where they have a menu, and on the menu is a rape fantasy. By the way, for anyone who thinks that's okay and a safe place for people to play this out, it's not. It's practice. Get it off the menu. There are no excuses. So at this point, my friend came to visit me, and I told her the story because she had a very similar one. This was exactly 1 year ago. And she told me how the process of reporting a crime and was with me when I made the call. But it was not like telling a friend. The sheriff immediately began interrogating me with questions about my involvement, about being paid, about my job. And my friend stepped in and asked why he was doing that, to which he replied, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. And now I believe he really is the devil's advocate, because my case was so shockingly mishandled, it is beyond suspicion. He gave me a case number, which my friend and I repeated back twice to ensure it was correct. He told me a detective and an advocate would be calling me the next day to meet immediately in person to go over details. And he said he could not give me their info for security reasons and that they would reach out to me. He said he couldn't give me his number either, but gave me an email contact. He assured me that under no circumstances would the assailant be contacted whatsoever. I prepared a very detailed timeline with pictures that was many, many pages long, and I was ready. I waited, and no call the next day. I waited, and no call the day after that. I was living in deep anxiety all day, every day, just waiting. On the third day, I called the police station with my case number, and they said there was nothing recorded under that case number, but that the officer was probably just very busy and would get around to processing it. I called back every other day for a whole month. Always the same answer, nothing under that case. I emailed the sheriff, no reply. I drove down to the sheriff's office and told the clerk at the desk that I had reported a serious crime a month earlier and had been waiting to hear from someone, and that it was really stressful for me. She too couldn't find anything, and when I started to tear up, she said, okay, let's try something else. Let's look up your name. After some searching, she did find the case, and the number was not even close to the one I had been given. She said, it looks like it was just now, like right now, today, assigned to a detective. So he should be contacting you shortly. I told her I didn't have the confidence that the detective would reach out, and she said she couldn't give any information for security reasons. I just had to wait. I went home that night and was watching my favorite TV show, Yellowstone, with my boyfriend, when after 6 years of complete silence, he who must not be named publicly texted me randomly out of the blue and said, just got a feeling, hope all is well. That very day that my case is assigned, oh, Dancer, must you? Sorry, he's having some indigestion. Oh, the very day my case is assigned to a detective, the assailant reaches out by text and says, just got a feeling, hope all is well. I don't think so. I don't think it's a coincidence. The next day, the detective did reach out and set up an in-person interview for a few days later. He met me at the back of the building and took me up some steps to a private room. He immediately starts talking about horses, and I say, "How do you know that I have horses?" And he pointed to the alfalfa on my dress and the mud on my boots, which is fair enough. He listened to my long story about the assaults while I was shaking, and I tell him it would be easier to just have him read all the details that I'd written out. He asked me to email the timeline to him so he could print it out. He's gone for about 30 minutes, maybe more, and when he returns with the printout, his remark was, "You should write a book." He tells me that despite believing me, there is no actual proof of any of this happening. Even my medical records proved nothing. And without a directly written or recorded confession, there is no case to pursue. He wants me to call on a recorded line to see if I can trick the assailant into a confession, like criminals really just admit their crimes. It seemed very far-fetched to me, but I did it anyways. He says he had to go to the next room to get approval to record the call and is gone for a few minutes. On his return, we made the call again and again with no answer. My heart was in my throat and my anxiety is like... I came back another day to try the phone call again because in California, only recorded confessions are allowed in court. And they have to be recorded in the presence of a police officer. You can't just do it by yourself. And why? Because you have to ask for consent if you're going to record someone and get their confession, which I find so ironic that you need to ask for consent to get a confession. Anyways, I had the feeling that he was not going to answer and that he was being alerted about this whole situation. And so I decided for myself that I must confront he who must not be named. I chose to meet with him at my favorite cafe in Occidental and directly asked him about everything. His head shrunk back into his neck and his eyes bulged just like when he got that call from Katie. We sat for 30 minutes while I studied his every expression and movement. He occasionally threw up some very odd hand signs. He was doing weird things with his hands. But I was not distracted and I kept constant eye contact. I did not let up for a second. My voice was calm and measured, but my eyebrows were wild caterpillars dancing on my face, just betraying my cool resolve. And then I asked him about the charge regarding the little girl, to which he said, "Oh, that was such bullshit. Oh, you know what happened? I was sleepwalking." Yeah. And he explained to me that he had a babysitter over who was apparently under 12. And why was he sleeping in the house with a babysitter over? Questions I don't know. And he woke up with his hands inside of her. And that's what happened. And he was so shocked when he woke up that he called the authorities on himself. So because his lawyer claims he was sleepwalking and it can't be disproven with evidence that he wasn't sleepwalking, he did no time for assaulting his young babysitter. And I'm left with so many questions regarding the failures of the justice system and my disgust for lawfare. But I'm left with no doubts in my mind after that meeting that this is a man who, after he himself was assaulted repeatedly as a young boy by an older man, he was young, living in Boonville and poor with a single mom, and him and his friends really wanted a canoe, and they saw this old abandoned barn owned by some old man, and he who must not be named publicly, when he was 8 years old, tried to steal this canoe from the barn. The old man caught him and said, "I'll let you have this canoe if you come out here every so often and let me F you in the A." And the boy, young child, agreed to this because he wanted that canoe, and he was a child and didn't know what the hell was going on and wanted to impress his friends. So, because he never processed his pain, he normalizes it on other victims. And I will not pass this pain on. I will announce to the world everything that happened, even if I can't name names publicly. because this has to end. And to any men who have ever been involved, who have ever watched this kind of thing happen, which there are so many, because I have 3 friends locally with group assault stories where they too were drugged and then assaulted. This is common. This is common. Why do I know 3 local young women that this has happened to? It's common. All I can do is use my voice to warn you, and that's all I want from this, is just for it to stop. I'm strong and I can live through anything that doesn't kill me, and I do it optimistically, and I live a life full of joy, and I actually owe a lot to these horses that keep me happy. She's like, no, I don't give consent for kisses. Sorry, baby. I just itch under your throat like you like. And I know I'm blessed with a rare kind of spirit, and not everyone bounces back, so this is not for me. It's to encourage all survivors to use their voice, to connect, to find out who they know in common, because we will be taken seriously if we can find that we knew the same people, and we have stories that we bring to the authorities about the same people. And if you think you have a similar experience to me, please send me a message. I live in Sonoma County. The person who must not be named publicly. It's okay. We can all share love. Come on. Hey, don't tell him to leave. Don't tell him to leave. He can be here too. I love you, Tay. Yes, so if we can get together and organize, that's what really needs to happen here. And also, I just want to reiterate to men that have participated or seen this, it's not too late to reach out to make amends. They may never be met, you may never be forgiven, but you can be an uncommon kind of hero that carves a path for other men to see that this happens, that it's caused by your own unprocessed traumas and pain, whatever those look like, and that you can put an end to it, that you can tell on your friends. And maybe we would be taken seriously if men started to report it. This has to stop. And it can't just be women coming forward. It's got to be everybody. Please. It's so old. It's so primitive. It's time for it to just frickin' go away and die out. Be nice to him. Be good. So that's it. Sorry, long story. I know that was the short version too. Anyways, I'm going to continue selling dresses, and I'm going to be continuing to be naked because I will never stop being me no matter what anybody does to me. And no, even though I look like this, and even though I was a SWer, I did not ask for it. And many of these things happened before that era in my life, and they happen to people all the time, every day, okay? And no, most people do not report it. They'll come up with some statistic like 30% of people report. No, I think more like 1% of people report. Let me tell you, it was hard, and it was met with nothing. 10 yoga lessons, which I did appreciate. Thank you.